Hello there. Today I'm going to be doing another Leetcode problem, medium level difficulty, titled Cache with Time Limit. So let's jump right into it. The instructions say, write a class that allows getting and setting key value pairs. However, a time until expiration is associated with each key. The class has three public methods: set, get, and count. For the set method, we are accepting an integer key and an integer value and a duration in milliseconds. Once the duration has elapsed, the key should be inaccessible. The method should return true if the same unexpired key already exists and false otherwise. Both the value and the duration should be overwritten if the key already exists. Okay, so for our set method, for those of you that don't know, set is a function that is utilized within maps that is used to insert keys and values. So we want to be inserting these values into our map that we're going to create, presumably. And what we also want to do inside this method is to return a true or false statement to check and see, if the same key has been discovered more than once. And if it has, we want to return true and false otherwise. So when the user creates multiple instances of our class with different values for each of these three parameters, if the key is ever encountered more than once when using multiple instances, then we want to what we want to be doing is the duration, the value and the duration should both be overwritten once the same key has been discovered twice. So the old value and the old duration should be deleted, and then the new value and duration associated with that same key should be updated. I know that was kind of complicated, but perhaps that'll be clear to understand once we code. But for now, we can just move on to the get method, which is much more simple. If an unexpired key exists, it should return the associated value. Otherwise, it should return -1. Okay, so it's saying if a key that has not had its timer run out, we want to return that key. But if the timer did run out and the key gets deleted, which happens within our set method, then we simply just return -1. Okay, so in our count method, it says return the count of unexpired keys. Okay, so that one's much more simple to understand. You're simply just returning the amount of keys that has not been expired. And so let's move on to the examples. So within these examples, we have actions, values, time delays. Looks pretty confusing, but let's see if we can make it easier to understand. So with the actions, what's happening here is that we're calling upon the methods that were described up here. And also time-limited cache, which just means that this is just calling upon the class itself to then utilize the methods inside of that class. And the values associated with each. So we know that, for instance, the set method has three values: key, value, duration. And sure enough, there's three values inside this little array here. And so that's pretty easy to understand, I think. And so look at get, for instance, has an empty array associated with itself, which means that we called upon the get method and it returned nothing. So this is the same as -1, by the way. That's what that means. And then we also have time delays, and this just means that the 50, for instance, means 50 milliseconds. So each number is associated with milliseconds, and so 0, right? When we call upon the class, that's happening instantly. followed by the set method. So these two are occurring instantly as soon as we are utilizing that specific method, the set method. And the get method occurs 50 milliseconds after the set method, right? So it's kind of happening in sync, if that makes sense. Get is occurring 150 milliseconds. Is occurring after 150 milliseconds. So that's not that important. You don't need to know what's really happening with the time delays to understand the problem, but I just thought I'd try to describe it. Luckily, it's not important. And so the output, right? So the class itself is not going to have any output. That's why it says null. But the set, remember, if you remember from the description of the set method, we're returning a true or false statement. We're checking to see if we've found the same key more than once. And so that's all that is. It's just a true or false statement. And then get, we're checking to see if we can find any unexpired keys. We found one key that was unexpired, so it's returning 42. That's pretty straightforward. The examples that you can see here aren't that really important to help you understand what's happening. It'll become much more clear once we actually code. So let's just jump into that. And so let's create our methods. So we have a class that's already built for us called time limited cache. And so what are some initial thoughts here? Well, one, we know that we want to be storing keys and values, and what is the best storage mechanism, so to speak, that we can use for keys and values, right? A hash map. And we know that for every instance of our class, we need to have a hash map to work with. More specifically, we want to have an empty hash map to work with for each instance. So we can use that inside of our constructor method. So let's build that now. Constructor. And if you don't know, the constructor method is just the method that is used to store parameters, properties that are going to be built in for each specific instance. And for ours, all we want is an empty hash map, which we're going to be calling cache, right? It's a common name for a hash map. So this will be, cache is equal to new map. All right. So each instance of our time limited cache class is going to have a completely empty map to start off with. And we use the this keyword to say, okay, this is referring to the current instance of our time limited cache class. All right, so we got our nice looking hash map there. So let's jump into the creating the set method. So we can just start off by typing in the values they give us here, key, value, and duration. Okay. And now, I think what would make sense is to start off by adding in the values into our hash map. But you'll also notice is that we have a duration variable here that's being passed in. So we have to ask ourselves, okay, well, we know that we want to be storing a key and a value, right? But we also want to code a timer that goes in to each key, and once that timer expires, then the key becomes deleted, right? As the instructions mentioned. So how can we do that? Well, we have to think, how can we have multiple properties within a specific key? One of those properties being a set timeout function that deletes the key itself. Well, you use an object, right? An object can store properties that can properly house a function that can do what we want it to do. So I'll show you what I mean. So the first thing that we should do is just say this.cache.set, just like normal. So we're creating the key, right? That part's easy. But for the value of that key, we want to be creating an object. And I'll show you why. So the first property of our object, value, right? It's just the value itself. That makes sense. But the second property is what we're going to call the reference. The reference to the set timeout function. The set timeout function that's going to be storing the timer that will delete our key right here. And so I'll show you what I mean. So inside this reference property, we're going to be saying set timeout. And our endpoint for our set timeout function is going to be a delete function. So I'll show you what that looks like. This.cache.delete. What are we deleting? The key, right? And the delay before this endpoint this action is being taken is the amount of time that was passed into our method duration. So here we put duration. Okay. So there we go. That's how we are able to pair each key with a timer that's stored inside of its value that will go off with the amount of time provided for us for our method. Okay, so now that we've stored everything that we want inside of our map, the next bit that we want to focus on is accounting for another instance being used that's going to actually be checking to see if the key has been found more than once. And if it has, we want to be clearing the value and the duration of the timer. So how can we do that? Well, what we can do is we can first, since we're dealing with true and false statements, right, we want to be planting a Boolean flag. And the reason for that is, I'll show you actually. Let me just create the Boolean flag real quick. I'll show you what I mean. And this will be, we'll call this found. Yeah, I like that. This will be equal to this.cache.has. Has what? The key. We're looking to see if our hash map has the key. And if we do find it, then within our if statement, we want to say, we want to be doing what? We want to be going into our hash map to clear the timer that we created here and delete it. So I'll show you how you can do that. So we can say if found, then we go into our hash map, and then we can say, so in order to get into the object, we want to be using the get function. And then we can say getting the key. So .get key is retrieving the object itself for us. And inside the object, we want to be accessing the reference property. Oh, I forgot to do an important part, but I'll show you what that is. You first want to be in order to clear a timer, it's clear timeout, right? And we want to be inserting this into the parameter of that function, like so. And so what this is going to be doing is just going to be going into our object by retrieving the object from the value inside of our key and accessing the reference property. Oops. And then using the clear timeout function to delete the timer that was stored inside the reference property. Okay, I like that. And now what we want to be doing is the last bit is we want to be returning something, and that is returning true or false to see if we have found the same key more than once. So all we have to do is return found. And that will simply return the true or false statement that we created up here. And there we go. So now we've created our set method. I like the look of that. Now what I want to do is going and creating our get method. So this could be get. We're taking in one parameter, key. And it says if an unexpired key exists, it should return the associated value. Otherwise, it's return -1, okay? So we want to return a key if that key has not had its timer run out. So if the timer did run out, then we return -1. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So we can do a condition here. And this could be, let me think for a second. Okay, we can use the question mark operator. I think that'd be a good idea. And for our condition for that operator, we want to be saying, okay, a true or false statement. So we can use .has for this. So we can say this .cache .has. What are we checking to see if it has? A key, right? And if it does, our true statement will be, we simply want to return the value of that key. So we have to use this .cache.get key, and now we're inside of our object. We want to be accessing the value property, so we have to use dot notation and say .value. And for our false statement, we want to be saying just returning -1. Oh, and I forgot to type in my return statement at the beginning. And that looks great to me. I think that makes perfect sense. And now, last but not least, let's create the count method. So we can say count. It says no parameter in it. What are we doing here? We're simply returning the amount of keys that we have inside of our map. So we can do this by saying return, this is going to be easy, this .cache. So in order to return the amount of keys inside your map, you use the size method. And that should be everything. We can test to see if this works or not. Great, it works. And I hope you enjoyed my explanation and of this problem. And thanks for watching.